In 1943, the British Directorate for the Development of Various Weapons, DMWD, was tasked with developing a weapon that could penetrate the concrete defenses of the Atlantic Wall, an extensive system of coastal fortifications built by Nazi-built, and thus the DMWD invented the Panzerdrum two-wheeler, connected by a sturdy drum-like axle with rockets on the wheels to move it forward. Filled with explosives, it should storm enemy defenses, collide with them, and explode, creating a gap big enough for a tank. But when it was tested on a quiet English beach, things didn't go as planned. The 70 slow-burning cordite rockets attached to the two 3-foot steel wheels went into action, and it was pretty impressive for about 20 seconds for the rockets to peel off and go in all directions. Chasing a dog and the generals ran. The rest was chaos when the Panzerdrum stormed the beach, completely out of control. Unsurprisingly, the Panzerdrum never saw the battle.
There was the giant Panzerdrum. Huge Catherine wheel crammed with explosives which would propel itself up the beach to the German positions. It's been said, however, that it was a spoof to lead the Germans to think we were landing on the broad sandy beaches of Calais.
In 1940, the Wehrmacht salvaged a strange remote-controlled vehicle prototype from the Seine. Designed by French vehicle designer Adolphe Cagrès, this prototype inspired the Germans to develop their own remote-controlled vehicle, mainly as an anti-tank weapon. The result was the Goliath tracked mine, a 1-foot-high, 4-foot-long tracked vehicle that could carry about 60 kilograms of explosives. It could be driven under enemy tanks by remote control and detonated. The Goliath had several problems, however the remote control connection was established between the vehicle and the driver via a 2.132-foot cable. Enemy soldiers quickly learned that they could neutralize the Goliath by cutting the cable. It was also painfully slow at only 10 miles per hour. It had pathetic ground clearance, meaning it could easily get stuck, and it was only covered in thin armor. However, the Germans produced 7,564 Goliaths and used the weapons in combat during the Warsaw Uprising and on the Normandy beaches. But it paved the way for the development of later remote-controlled weapons. Captured Goliaths also provided entertainment to American soldiers.
An unmanned miniature tank, the Goliath, carried a 200-pound explosive charge for the destruction of bunkers and armored vehicles by remote control. It was towed to the area of action on a small trailer. Early models of the Goliath were powered by 2 battery-driven auto-starter motors, 1 motor to each track. Later models were powered by a Zundap 2-stroke engine. The Goliath had a maximum speed of 12 miles per hour and a range of 650 yards. It was guided and detonated by trailing wires, the controller sending electrical signals to vary the speed of each track and so steer the weapon. The Goliath was not a success, primarily because its tracks were vulnerable to small arms fire. It was used for the most part on the Eastern Front, but a few were deployed at Anzio in Italy and in France during the Battle of Normandy.
In 1944, Japan devised a nefarious but ingenious plan to drop bombs on the United States. Using a jet stream over the Pacific, they launched paper balloons with explosive devices that drift unnoticed across the ocean towards their enemies, causing fear and panic, fear for America. In any case, the supply dimension is the plan. They launched their first hot air balloon on November 3, 1944, and it is estimated that between that time and April 1945, about 1,000 Fugo balloons reached North America. After the war, records found in Japan show a total of about 9,000 launches. Although it was launched many times, only one resulted in the death of people. On May 5, 1945, a pregnant woman and 5 children died in a forest near Bly, Oregon, when they started playing with a big paper ball. It exploded. Due to the uncontrollable nature of the balloon bomb and the uncertainty of atmospheric conditions, experimental weapons were largely unsuccessful and remain relatively unknown to this day. Considered the first intercontinental weapons system.
By mid-1944, Japan is getting hit on a daily basis from B-29 bombers. They are literally obliterating cities. Japan was dying. And Japan's only reaction to this is to strike back. Japan is faced with a serious problem. They can't develop a high-tech weapon.
Our problem's in the brain inside of the Japanese head. There are 70 million of these in Japan.
But perhaps a low-tech weapon, like a balloon, could be launched against America.
A brain that thought in the modern way could be taught to use the latest modern weapons.
They develop a technology that is absolutely brilliant. Simple in its approach, but the technical ability of this bomb to be able to float to America and on its way be controlled by a series of sandbags that gets it to its target is incredible.
Someone had to sit down and run the numbers to come up with exactly how many sandbags, exactly how far they could project the balloon to move. And I find that to be pretty incredible.
That same brain today remains the problem, our problem.
Over 1,000 were launched. They went as far as Texas, and as long as they stayed airborne, they could carry great distances. So depending on the wind and the altitude they maintained, they were falling all over Western America.
In May of 1945, a minister, his wife, and 5 children from their parish were out on an outing near a town called Lakeview, Oregon. The minister was parking the car. He let his wife out and the children. They went into the forest. He heard her exclaim, "Look what we've found." And seconds later, by the time he got up there, his wife, who was pregnant at the time and only 26 years old, and these 5 children were dead.
It's tragic to think just how unlucky this family was.
The only known deaths in the continental United States caused by the enemy during World War II.
The wrong place, the wrong time, and the innocent curiosity that went horribly wrong.
There are still balloons out there, obviously. Of the thousands they sent over, less than 1,000 have been discovered. So you have to think that in the massive forests of the Pacific Northwest, Canada, Washington, Oregon, there are some balloons out there.
If you're hiking in the Northwest, be a little careful. And if you see an element like a wheel with teeth on it, that's the sharp end of a disaster awaiting you. It can explode. They're still there. They're still waiting to be found.
It was a radio-controlled German bomb nicknamed Fritzsche that was dropped from the air. Its main function was to destroy heavily armored naval targets. It was based on the standard South Dakota 1400 armor bomb, but had superior aerodynamics and 4 small wings 4.4 feet, 1.35 meters wide. But to drop the thing, a gunner had to fly directly over the intended target, which left it immensely exposed. However, it turned out to be a formidable weapon that carried out attacks on the Allies. On September 9, 1943, shortly after the Italian armistice, the Germans threw several of them onto the battleship Roma and sank it with 1,455 men on board. It was also used to sink the British cruiser HMS Spartan, the British destroyer HMS Janus, and also to damage many other ships. More than 2,000 Fritzsches were built, but only 200. Part of the problem was that the bombs couldn't change direction abruptly, exposing the groups of bombers who had suffered heavy losses.